Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Detroit stormed banner night in KC and got the win. Is it time for the Lions to restore the roar? Plus, the Kansas City Chiefs are 0-1 to start their Super Bowl defense. And the Aaron Rodgers era begins this week for the New York Jets. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedon or enter promo code LOCKEDON for a free water bottle with any purchase. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Shh, do you hear that? The roar. It's percolating. It's not restored yet, but after a week 1 win in Arrowhead on Thursday night, the Detroit Lions have at least fans thinking about restoring the roar. A 21-20 thriller, and Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, they are saying we are here. Speaking of here, Matt Derry here with us now, and he is our host for Locked On Lions. Matt, how did Detroit go into Arrowhead, one of the toughest places in the league to play, and go win?
Pete, I mean, it was what a wild game, certainly on Thursday night. The Lions were not just there to show up, not just there to get a little run on NBC and be the cute little story. They came in there and were very physical early. I thought the defense played pretty darn well, holding Patrick Mahomes to 20 points. Obviously, Kelsey was not there. The Kadarius Toney drops were a huge factor in this game. But at the end, Lions down 6. Really impressive drive. Defense gets a stop. Then they run it out with just physical play up front with their offensive line, shades of what happened in Green Bay last year in Week 18.
I just got to bring that one up.
You know it well. And they're 1-0. This was some kind of victory.
No one is going to take the win away from them, right? It counts. It's in the standings. The hay is in the barn, all those cliches. But we know no Chris Jones, no Travis Kelce for this one. So if you're going to do the glass half empty take here, you could say, okay, well, the Chiefs didn't have their 2 best players. If you're the Lions, what's the counter to that?
You don't care. You don't care. Mahomes is 5-0 and going into tonight in Week 1 games. A lot of things went against the Lions. I mean, Taylor, the right tackle for the Chiefs, Terry McAulay on NBC, the referee expert, the former referee, is saying he jumps off sides or he's false starting on every play, and he's lined up correctly, lined up as a slot receiver. Chris Collinsworth said at one point, like he just was not in a legal position the whole game. Right. So, and look, that's a tough place to play. They raised the banner, all of those things. I just think for Detroit, and you know this well, Peter, you've been around this division. I mean, they don't do this. This is not something that Lions fans are used to, Lions executives, anybody is used to. The last 2 games they played on NBC in front of everybody, and they've gone into Lambeau and Arrowhead and won. That's arguably the 2 toughest places to win. So, hey, sky's the limit for this team, and they can play a lot better. There were things they didn't do well. The play calling wasn't great. Jahmyr Gibbs, guy touches the ball every time, and it's 8-9 yards a touch. Yet there were series he was on the sidelines. They got things to correct, and yet they still won. Yeah, winning, not just going into Lambeau Field and won, beat Aaron Rodgers at Lambeau Field, and then went into Arrowhead. Didn't just go into Arrowhead and won, beat Patrick Mahomes. Pretty good stretch for this Lions team. Matt, thanks for your time. All right, Pete, thank you. Stay up to date all year on the Detroit Lions by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Lions on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, how important is Game 1 for the New York Jets? Before we get to that, Joe Burrow is the highest paid player in NFL history. I've never had a pair of shorts that made me look good while also being really comfortable until I got a pair of Birddogs. Birddogs just make you look good. They are stretch khaki shorts designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. They fit like a dream. I'm wearing them right now. I wore them all day. It was 96 here, and I wore them all day, and I'm still wearing them, and they're wonderful.
Birddogs invented cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches, so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice that movement. You can seriously go from the couch to the golf course to a night out with the same pair of Birddogs on. I did it today. These are the most comfortable pair of shorts I've ever owned. Go to birddogs.com/lockdown or enter promo code lockdown for a free water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockdown or promo code lockdown for that water bottle with your order. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. The Cincinnati Bengals have finally decided to back up the Brinks truck and have made franchise quarterback Joe Burrow the highest paid player in NFL history. The deal worth $275 million over the next 5 years, with $219 million guaranteed. Burrow's contract also has the second most guarantees in NFL history, behind only the Cleveland Browns' Deshaun Watson. A lot of guaranteed money in that division.
Over $219 million in guarantees for Joe Burrow on his new 5-year extension. I'm Jake Lisco from Locked On Bengals, and we're working on an emergency podcast on this Joe Burrow deal. But until then, 5 years, $275 million for Joe Burrow, making him the highest paid player in the NFL and blowing away any total guarantees the Bengals have ever done before, breaking precedent for their best player. And it makes all the sense in the world. We've talked about this contract potentially or very likely forcing the Bengals to break their structure all along. And certainly in doing this deal, they've guaranteed money outside of year one of this contract. Joe Burrow will be in Cincinnati through the 2029 season. He's got 7 years left now with this 5-year extension, making $55 million per year in new money on those additional 5 years. We'll have more for you over on the Locked On Bengals feed on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast very soon.
Another former LSU Tiger is looking to get paid. Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson has said he wants to sign an extension with the franchise. Jefferson has an NFL record 4,825 receiving yards through the first 3 years of his career. It's essentially the greatest start to a receiver career in NFL history.
This doesn't become a problem until like this time next year, because Justin Jefferson will play on his 5th-year option in 2024. He could be tagged the year after that. Like, they've got lots and lots of team control that they can sort of lord over Justin Jefferson if an extension truly becomes an issue. That means the extension gets more and more expensive as time goes on. It also lasts longer, right? Because you're starting it later. So it lasts into higher aged seasons for Justin Jefferson, which is good right now because he's young. So we get, those more of those prime seasons. But, if he signs after, say, Jamar Chase will get his extension next year. And if Jefferson signs after that, he might have his price affected by that. So all of this goes to say it's definitely not anything to worry about for a while. But hey, maybe they get a little nickel and dimed about it. And if they wait too long, then they might, they might have to pay a little bit more, or they stare at him for a year and he capitulates and he takes less than his agent was asking for.
The University of North Carolina will be without wide receiver Tez Walker for the 2023 season after he lost his appeal for eligibility following his transfer from Kent State.
Breaking news. The committee reviewing UNC wide receiver Tez Walker's case has voted to deny the reinstatement of his eligibility, meaning that Tez Walker will not play for North Carolina this season. This comes a day after the NCAA's tone-deaf tweet about supporting student athletes in their mental health. A biting statement coming out from head coach Mack Brown, quote, "I don't know that I've ever been more disappointed in a person, a group of people, or an institution than I am with the NCAA right now. Plain and simple, the NCAA has failed Tez and his family, and I've lost all faith in its ability to lead and govern our sport." In a quote from AD Bubba Cunningham, this decision undermines the fair treatment of student athletes and further erodes the public's confidence in our national governing body. So what's next? Will we see legal action? Will Carolina accept this news and move on? We'll find out. But on Saturday, the Tar Heels host App State and will do so without Tez Walker.
New Orleans Saints tight end Jimmy Graham will not be charged following his August arrest in Newport Beach. Graham was arrested for being under the influence, but it was later announced he had a medical episode that left him disoriented. There will be plenty of things for Chiefs fans to excuse in a week 1 performance by the Kansas City Chiefs. Not only were they coming off a Super Bowl win, pretty nice, but no Travis Kelce in this one, no Chris Jones in this one. Still, a 21-20 loss like this has to sting. Chris Clark from Locked On Chiefs joins me now. And Chris, I think Kadarius Toney just dropped another pass as we're recording this. I'm not sure if you can confirm that. What happened in this game for the Chiefs to, for long stretches of this game, look so un-Chiefs-like?
Well, it begins and ends on third down. 4 for 6, I think, in the first half, and 0 for 7 in the second. You can't win games that way. You're going to lose if you go 0 for 7 on third down, unless your offense is just so fantastic. You're moving the ball up and down the field on first and second down. But the problem is if you have 7 third downs, and I think actually I'm counting a fourth down in there too. So 6 third downs and a fourth down attempt. If you have that many attempts, you're not going to win the game. You cannot score points not moving the ball on third down. And, when it happened, I actually agreed with Andy Reid not to go for it. When he was closer to the goal line, I was thinking that, maybe he would go for it on 4th and 2, but I agreed with the call because I thought Kansas City was going to get another chance to score a touchdown, and it just never happened that way.
The offense last year with very similar players, with Travis Kelce, of course, won a Super Bowl. So it's hard to sit here and say the skill position players aren't good enough, especially Chiefs media, Chiefs fans, very excited about Justin Ross and what he could do in this offense. He has yet to really have a meaningful moment in the NFL. Still, though, Chris, it's hard to watch this game and not come away going, are we sure they have enough around Patrick Mahomes to be consistent week in and week out, especially in an AFC? I mean, this Lions team might be the 3rd or 4th best team in the NFC, but if they were in the AFC, they'd be like the 8th or 9th best team in the AFC. Are we sure they have enough around Patrick Mahomes to compete with this version of the AFC?
Oh, I think they do. I think that there's a couple of things that played into this. If you have Travis Kelce, I think you win the game, and you may win the game by 2 scores. He may not have gotten the touchdowns, but he's moving the ball on third down at least 2 or 3 of those times in the second half, and he's probably converting one of the third downs in the first half that they missed. His presence not being on the field was huge for them, but you can't just rely on him every single time, obviously. And the big thing for them is you can't just continue dropping balls. Kadarius Toney had one of the roughest games I've seen from a wide receiver. That's going to be hard to come back from. But you look at the first half, Rashee Rice did phenomenal things. After dropping the first pass, they went back to him, he got a touchdown. Then he had that big play to get him in position before the MVS big catch and the Justin Watson big play to score another touchdown. And then he disappeared in the second half. I think I only actually saw him in on one play. There's lots of questions as to how this is going to work out. I think they have the players around Mahomes, and I think it'll be fine. It's just going to take time.
Defensively, what did you think of how this team held up without its best player, and I think pretty clearly its best player?
Well, I would say he's their best player, but I would also say that anytime that the defense gives up 14 points, which is what happened tonight, the Chiefs should win, and it shouldn't be close. This was all on their offense, and I'll be quite frank on it. Chris Jones, I think, really kind of lost leverage tonight. Yeah, they lost, and people are going to say that maybe he gains leverage by the loss, but the defense looked great tonight, and the Lions are going to be a good offense this year.
Stay up to date all year on the Kansas City Chiefs by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and Locked On Chiefs on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, how important is Game 1 for the New York Jets? The new look New York Jets kick off their 2023 NFL season. Where else but on prime time, Monday Night Football. And we just figured with all of the shenanigans that are going to go on in week 1 on Sunday, we were not going to have time to talk about the biggest game of week 1, which is Aaron Rodgers as a New York Jet taking on his buddy, Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. John Butchko from Locked On Jets joins me now. And John, this is a team that got to have Aaron Rodgers in OTAs, got to have Aaron Rodgers for a little bit of the preseason, but this is still all new territory for him and this team. What are reasonable expectations for them in their first game of the season?
Well, I think you're hoping they come out strong. I don't think there's ever a must win in game 1, but this is a game against the team that's the biggest competition in the division. It's a chance to bank a victory against that team. And, late in the season, tiebreakers may come into play, and we may look back on this game as a pretty significant one. I think if you look at the Jets' schedule, the tough part, at least on paper, you never know. I mean, sometimes teams surprise you by being good. Sometimes teams surprise you by being bad. But it seems like the tougher games are in the front part. So I think really the first 6-7 weeks, just about survival, getting through it 500, because things really start to open up around, mid to late October. And this team can go on a run. So I think that, I look at it not just in terms of week one, but I look at the first couple of games, and you want to just bank a couple wins. You don't want to fall too far behind, but I really do think if this team can get through the first 6 games like 3-3, they'll be in great position to take advantage of what, at least on paper, looks like a softer schedule in the second half.
Yeah, it may not be a must win, but isn't it a must not look bad? Like if things do not go well, suddenly you may get a sulkier version of Aaron Rodgers. But let's just, for our listeners who may not have the Jets schedule memorized, home for the Bills in this game, at Dallas, home for New England, home for Kansas City, at Denver versus Philly, at Giants, home for the Chargers. It's not just the first 6, like it's really the first 8 games, first half of the season. This is pretty brutal. It seems like you'd like to look pretty decent, even if you lose the game. You'd like to go down swinging, right? Like there's an aesthetic portion of this too, even if the BCS is not involved.
Well, I think, there's 2 aspects of this. There's the guys in the locker room, and Jets have a veteran roster. If you actually look, there was one reporter who actually compiled the average age of each 53-man roster after cut down. The Jets have the second oldest 53-man roster in the league. So I actually think that this team will have the maturity to handle a bit of a rough start, but then there's also the New York component. There's the media, the fans, and I don't think the phrase keeping it all in perspective has ever applied to anything happening in New York. So I actually think the team can survive, a bit of a uneven start. If you look historically, and there aren't a ton of examples of this, but if you look at great quarterbacks who have changed teams, with Tom Brady, of course, they won the Super Bowl the first year, but the first couple months they were kind of uneven, and they caught fire at the end of the season. Peyton Manning, Broncos ended up with the 1 seed in the AFC his first year, but they got off to a bit of a slow start the first month. Brett Favre, you go back to 2008, Jets.
Heard of him?
Yeah. Last time the Jets traded for Packers Hall of Fame quarterback 15 years ago, that was an uneven start. I mean, there was a game in San Diego week 3 where he had no idea where the receivers were going. I mean, he was throwing the ball like receivers were cutting across the field. He's throwing a deep route, and that was a little different because the Jets traded for him in training camp, and he didn't really know the system. But
didn't he also, though, have like a 6-touchdown game?
He did it was very up and down. He did against Arizona, but he only caught fire the middle portion of that season, and then he got injured, and the end of the season was a disaster. And if he hadn't gotten injured, who knows what would have happened? But I think it can take a little bit of time. So I understand the point. Look, you can't get off to a 1-5 start. You can't get off to an 0-4 start. I think that if you play decent football the first half of the season, there might be some panic when they lose a game from the media, from the fans, but I think the guys in the locker room will be able to handle it.
And finally, the Detroit Lions and offensive coordinator Ben Johnson have said they would use 12th overall pick Jahmyr Gibbs in ways never seen before. Apparently those ways were to draft a running back in the top 12 and then refuse to give him the football. Revolutionary stuff. Thanks for making Locked On Sports today your first listen. Now go find your favorite team's Locked On podcast and make them your second listen. Coming up next week, the NFL season is here, and we will recap all of it. So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.